Imagine signing a 23-year, totally ironclad contract to buy electricity at a 50% premium over the market rate.
Right.
On the surface, I mean, if you were running a heavy industrial manufacturing plant, that sounds like corporate malpractice.
Yeah, it really does.
It sounds like a fast track to just destroying your unit economics.
Yeah.
But today, we are looking at why some of the largest, most sophisticated industrial titans in India are racing to do exactly that.
It seems entirely counterintuitive until you look at the balance sheets of these facilities and, the regulatory environment they operate in.
Exactly.
Because they aren't paying a premium for raw electricity. They're paying a premium for certainty in an incredibly volatile landscape.
Right. So we're taking a deep dive into a stack of market forecasts, policy analyses, and some highly specific developer data.
Yeah.
And we're focusing particularly on CLEANMAX Enviro Energy Solutions, or CLEANMAX. The mission here is to decode how the Indian energy market is undergoing this structural rewiring. We are shifting from an era of grid-only industrial power, where a factory just takes whatever the state utility gives them, to a landscape defined by contracted, firm, renewable procurement for commercial and industrial users, the C&I sector.
And the sources make it abundantly clear that this transition has moved, far beyond the realm of corporate ESG brochures.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a durable economic transition here. Historically, green energy in the C&I space was a nice-to-have, maybe a small rooftop solar array for optics.
Just to look good on the annual report.
Exactly. But now, driven by escalating industrial tariffs and liberalized green power access, these companies are hunting for round-the-clock clean energy because their operational survival and cost predictability depend on it.
So let's start by defining the actual battleground. Because if you read the mainstream financial press, you constantly hear about India's total electricity demand.
Oh, constantly.
And the numbers are astronomical. You see headlines about hundreds of gigawatts of installed generation capacity. But reading these sources, it becomes obvious that looking at the total generation capacity, or the gross national demand, gives you a completely distorted view of the actual commercial opportunity.
Yeah, relying on total electricity demand is a trap.
Right.
The market we are analyzing is specifically India's eligible C&I electricity load. That is a radically smaller, highly filtered subset of the total power market.
Extremely filtered.
We are talking about the demand that can legally, financially, and practically be served through open access, captive models, or hybrid renewable contracts.
I was looking at the framework and the research, and I'm thinking about this like a corporate joint venture. If a multinational is looking for a local partner in a country of 1 billion people, the population size is irrelevant.
Yeah, completely irrelevant.
They filter for companies with the right licenses, the right capitalization, the right geographic footprint, and a spotless credit history. The actual pool of partners is minuscule compared to the headline population.
Right.
And the sources use a layered funnel to estimate this true addressable market, and it aggressively filters out the noise.
That joint venture analogy maps perfectly onto the underwriting process for a long-term power purchase agreement, or PPA.
Okay, how so?
Well, you can't underwrite a 20-year infrastructure asset based on theoretical demand. You start at the top of the funnel by isolating industrial and large commercial demand strictly in states where open access frameworks are actually viable.
So state by state.
Exactly. If a state's regulatory regime makes wheeling power across the grid economically punishing, that state's entire load is mathematically irrelevant to a developer.
So if we filtered out the closed access or hostile jurisdictions, my assumption is, well, we still can't just take every factory left in the open access states, right?
No, absolutely not.
Some of these businesses must be terrible financial bets for long-term energy contract.
They are. The next filter requires removing consumers below the regulatory load thresholds, but more importantly, as you alluded to, stripping out users with weak credit profiles.
Right, because of the upfront cost.
Yeah, a renewable energy developer is deploying substantial capital up front to build bespoke solar and wind assets. If an off-taker operates in a volatile sector and might face insolvency in 4 years, they are just unbankable.
Makes sense.
The funnel also excludes facilities with highly erratic load profiles. You need a predictable, baseload-heavy operation to make a tailored hybrid energy solution work.
So once you strip away the hostile states, the small users, the credit risks, and the erratic operations, you are left with the eligible load. But the sources don't stop there.
No, they don't.
They apply a Cushing share, projecting what portion of that highly filtered group will actually migrate from grid power to contracted renewables over the next 5 to 10 years.
Because inertia is a powerful force in industrial operations.
Yeah, nobody wants to change their setup if they don't have to.
Exactly. Even when the economics make sense, transitioning power procurement takes time, boardroom approvals, and infrastructure adjustments. So you apply that switching share and then convert that future migrating load into gigawatts of contracted capacity based on the specific product mix they need.
Whether that's a solar-wind hybrid or storage-backed, round-the-clock power.
Right.
I have to push back on this layered funnel approach, though. I mean, India's installed renewable base is already staggering. We see utility-scale solar parks covering thousands of acres.
True.
Doesn't the sheer velocity of that utility-scale deployment tell us enough about the market size and the adoption rate? Like, why obsess over this granular, bottom-up C&I funnel?
Well, because utility-scale deployment and C&I procurement are fundamentally different beasts.
Okay.
They're driven by completely different behavioral incentives. Utility-scale projects are usually backed by sovereign or state guarantees. They're selling into the grid at large. The C&I market is defined entirely by private procurement behavior.
Ah, I see.
An industrial facility is seeking a cheaper, more reliable direct replacement for grid power. The bottlenecks for utility scale are land and transmission, but the bottlenecks for C&I are counterparty credit quality and contractability.
So they don't really correlate.
Not directly, no. Tracking total installed gigawatts tells you nothing about the velocity of private industrial migration.
Which makes this layered funnel a masterclass in analyzing any B2B market. I mean, it is incredibly tempting to cite an inflated total addressable market in a pitch deck.
Oh, everybody does it.
Right. But by focusing only on the serviceable and obtainable demand, the customers who actually have the legal clearance, the balance sheet, and the operational incentive to sign a contract today, you expose where the real durable revenue sits.
It forces you to look at the market through the lens of friction. Every layer of that funnel represents a point of friction.
That's a great way to frame it.
And the developers who succeed are the ones who know how to underwrite and navigate that specific friction better than anyone else.
Let's shift to the catalyst then. We know exactly who is sitting at the bottom of this funnel, these highly rated, large-scale industrial users in open access states. The natural question for you listening to this is, why are they pulling the trigger right now? Why are they fleeing the traditional state utilities at this specific moment?
It comes down to a widening delta between what the grid charges and what the private market can offer. The economics have crossed a tipping point, particularly in major industrial hubs.
And the sources highlight states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, and Rajasthan for this, right?
Yes. In those specific states, the industrial consumers are experiencing escalating delivered power costs. And while general inflation or fuel costs play a part, the core structural issue buried in the sources is the trajectory of cross-subsidies.
Okay, the cross-subsidy mechanism. This is fascinating.
It's the engine of the Indian power sector's financial distress, honestly. State distribution companies, or discoms, routinely provide heavily subsidized or entirely free electricity to agricultural and specific residential segments.
Right, it's highly political.
Exactly. So to balance the books, or at least attempt to, they extract punitive tariffs from commercial and industrial users.
So as the cost to serve the subsidized agricultural base increases, or as state governments expand those subsidies for political reasons, the industrial tariff is forced upward. It's basically an escalating tax on industrial operations just to keep the lights on.
Exactly the problem. And as that industrial grid tariff climbs, the cost curve for renewable generation has historically been falling, or at least stabilizing.
So the gap just gets bigger.
Yeah, the spread between the punitive grid tariff and the levelized cost of energy from a private renewable contract has widened to a point where the payback period for a captive or open access project is aggressively attractive. It becomes a fiduciary duty for a CFO to migrate away from the grid.
And the policy environment is accelerating this too. The green energy open access rules are lowering the thresholds, making it legally simpler for smaller commercial entities to bypass the discom. Plus, you have the expansion of the interstate transmission system, the ISTS.
Oh, the ISTS network and the associated charge waivers are pivotal. You no longer have to build your solar farm in the same state as your factory.
Wait, really?
Yeah. A developer can harness peak solar irradiance in Rajasthan and wheel that power across the national grid to an automotive plant in Tamil Nadu. The geographical decoupling of generation and consumption radically improves the efficiency and economics of the projects.
That is huge. And then you add in the corporate mandates, the supply chain decarbonization targets, the RE100 commitments.
Yeah, the global pressure.
Global brands are telling their Indian manufacturing partners that if their assembly lines aren't running on clean energy by 2030, they will find a supplier who is. But this brings us to the operational reality, which is where I see a major point of tension.
The intermittency problem.
Right, because if I run a continuous manufacturing process in Maharashtra, say a chemical plant or a steel foundry, and I experience grid outages, I am losing crores every hour my line is down.
Absolutely.
I need absolute reliability. If I sign a green energy contract to bypass the grid, is that clean power actually firm enough to keep my operations running 24/7? Or am I just buying renewable energy certificates for an ESG report while still relying on the failing discom grid for my actual baseload?
That tension is driving the most significant technological shift in the sector today.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, historically, a CNI solar PPA gave you cheap power from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. When the sun went down, you were thrust back onto the grid, paying peak industrial tariffs.
Which defeats half the purpose.
Exactly. But industrial buyers are no longer settling for daytime-only power. They are demanding what the industry calls firm or dispatchable power.
They want grid independence.
They want absolute predictability. They are migrating away from standalone solar or wind contracts toward complex integrated hybrid and round-the-clock or RTC solutions. The data from the sources is actually striking on this point.
Oh, I saw that. The numbers are wild.
Yeah. In India's overall renewable tenders, the share of hybrid capacity leaped from approximately 12% in 2021 to over 49% in 2024.
That velocity is incredible. In just 3 years, half the market realized that standalone intermittent generation is a dead end for industrial applications.
Yeah, they figured it out fast.
It makes me think about the evolution of labor. Like early solar was like hiring a brilliant consultant who only shows up when the weather is nice.
That's a great way to put it.
They do great work when they are there, but you can't build your core manufacturing schedule around them. What the market is demanding now, these hybrid and RTC systems, is the equivalent of a dedicated 247 operational management team. They manage the inputs, they balance the load, and they guarantee the output regardless of external conditions.
But to achieve that 247 firmness, you have to introduce energy storage into the architecture. You pair solar and wind, which have complementary generation profiles. Wind often peaks in the evening or during monsoons when solar drops off, and you use storage to bridge the gaps. And the financial forecasts for this specific ecosystem are just staggering.
Let's look at those forecasts, because the capital requirements are immense. One market study in our research projects, India's hybrid solar wind energy storage market, will sit between $1.2 billion and $1.5 billion US dollars in 2026.
And the trajectory points to it scaling up to $5.5 billion to $7.0 billion by 2035, with cumulative installed hybrid capacity reaching 4.5 to 6.0 gigawatts as early as 2026.
And that is just the hybrid-specific slice. When the sources zoom out to the broader battery energy storage system market, the BESS market, the projections reflect an infrastructure supercycle.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the exact scoping, we're looking at the BES market hitting $8.59 billion by 2031, or the broader energy storage systems market reaching $21.8 billion by 2033.
The physical infrastructure required to meet those dollar figures is daunting. The Central Electricity Authority models suggest that over 411 gigawatt hours of storage might be needed by 2031 or 2032. With battery storage accounting for over 236 gigawatt hours of that total. Another pathway suggests 61 gigawatts of storage capacity is required by 2030 just to balance the planned 500 gigawatts of clean power generation.
But I want to pull this back to present-day reality.
Okay.
The sources highlight a gaping chasm between these astronomical projections and what is actually sitting on the ground today. The current commissioned energy storage base in India is only about 10.3 gigawatts.
And the composition of that 10.3 gigawatts is very telling. Fully 7.4 gigawatts of it is pumped hydro storage.
Which is a brilliant legacy technology, moving water between reservoirs at different elevations to store and generate kinetic energy.
Yeah, it works great.
But its geographical limitations and decade-long development cycles mean it cannot scale fast enough to meet localized C&I demand.
Precisely why battery energy storage systems are the focus. Yet only 2.9 gigawatts of the commissioned capacity is actually BESS.
2.9 gigawatts built. while the cumulative tendered capacity, the projects actively being bid on and designed in the pipeline, is over 100 gigawatts.
Right.
Why does this enormous gap exist? If the industrial demand is there and the capital is obviously circling, what is the friction preventing developers from turning that 100 gigawatts of paper tenders into steel and lithium on the ground?
The gap is a function of supply chain realities and unit economics. Until very recently, the price of lithium-ion cells and the associated balance of system costs made large-scale BSS deployment economically challenging for all but the most premium contracts.
So it's just too expensive.
Yeah. Furthermore, India has been heavily reliant on imported cell chemistry, which exposes developers to currency fluctuations and geopolitical supply chain bottlenecks.
So if a developer bids on a huge storage tender, they're taking a profound risk on where battery prices will be 2 years from now when they actually have to procure the hardware.
They're underwriting future technology curves. It's a huge risk. However, as global battery costs continue their downward trajectory and as domestic manufacturing capacity ramps up, that bottleneck is widening.
Okay, so relief is coming.
Yeah. The moment the levelized cost of storage drops enough to make RTC power definitively cheaper than the industrial grid tariff on a 247 basis, that 100-gigawatt tendered pipeline will convert into commissioned assets at lightning speed.
Which sets the stage for a brutal battle over market share. With billions of dollars at play and a fundamental shift toward complex, 247 integrated storage solutions, the developers who can execute on this infrastructure stand to generate decades of recurring revenue.
Decades.
And the sources outline a distinct arena of competitors fighting for these C&I contracts.
It is a market structure defined by severe fragmentation at the local developer level, but rapid consolidation at the top end. The sources categorize the competitors into two distinct warring factions.
Let's get into that. On one side, you have the C&I specialists. These are the companies singularly focused on corporate procurement: CLEANMAX, Amply Solar, Fourth Partner Energy, Ambiine Energy Transition, and Continuum Green Energy.
And arrayed against them are the utility-scale independent power producers, the IPPs. These are the behemoths of Indian infrastructure: Adani Green Energy, Tata Power, NTPC, Renew, JSW Energy.
Now, if I have an industrial facility looking to procure 50 megawatts of RTC power, how do these developers actually compete for my signature? I assume the lowest tariff wins, right?
Well, the tariff is the entry ticket to the conversation. If you aren't competitive on price, the procurement officer won't even look at your bid.
Fair enough.
But in the C&I space, the lowest tariff does not guarantee the contract. Execution reliability is paramount. A bespoke hybrid project requires acquiring specific parcels of land, securing state-level grid connectivity, and navigating local environmental clearances.
Because if a developer promises a tariff of rupees 3.50 but misses the commissioning deadline by 9 months, the factory is stranded on the grid paying rupees 8.0 during that entire delay. The cheap paper tariff becomes an operational liability.
Exactly. The execution risk is why state regulatory expertise is heavily weighted by buyers. The rules governing open access, the banking of surplus power, and the wheeling charges paid to the transmission utilities are not standardized across India.
Oh, they change by state.
They vary dramatically from state to state, and they change frequently. A developer who understands the granular intricacies of Karnataka's banking regulations has a tangible advantage over a utility giant trying to apply a one-size-fits-all model.
Counterparty strength is also a major factor here, isn't it? If a factory is locking in a 20-year energy strategy, they need absolute certainty that the developer will remain solvent, maintain the assets, and honor the performance guarantees for 2 decades.
Yes. We also have to analyze the supplier power in this ecosystem. Developers do not manufacture the core technology, they integrate it.
Right, they're buying the panels and batteries from someone else.
Exactly. They are highly dependent on global supply chains for solar modules, inverters, and battery cells. In environments where India imposes import duties or non-tariff barriers on foreign equipment to spur domestic manufacturing, qualified suppliers gain immense bargaining leverage.
The sources also point out that land acquisition and evacuation access, the physical infrastructure required to push generated power onto the transmission grid, are often more severe constraints than equipment pricing.
Oh, absolutely.
You can buy all the solar panels in the world, but if the local substation doesn't have the capacity to accept your electrons, your project is worthless.
That physical bottleneck dictates project viability. And developers aren't just competing against each other, they are competing against substitutes.
Like what?
A factory could choose rooftop self-generation for a portion of their load, or set up a third-party captive plant, or simply surrender to the status quo and remain a full-time customer of the DISCOM.
Let's explore the dynamic between the C&I specialists and the utility giants, because this seems fundamentally imbalanced to me.
Yes.
If I am a behemoth like Tata Power or Adani Green, I have access to incredibly cheap, long-term global capital. I have unparalleled procurement economies of scale. Why wouldn't I simply enter the C&I market, aggressively underbid the specialists on the tariff, and absorb the entire sector? How do niche players even survive that kind of capital assault?
It is the defining strategic question of the sector. The utility-scale players absolutely leverage their cheaper capital to cross-subsidize and apply downward pressure on tariffs, especially for the largest, most standardized corporate procurements. But the C&I market is fiercely resistant to commoditization.
It refuses to be a pure volume game.
Exactly. Supplying a utility grid is about pumping maximum raw megawatts into the transmission network at the lowest possible cost. Supplying a heavy industrial facility requires bespoke hybrid design.
Right.
You are engineering a solution combining solar, wind, and storage algorithms to perfectly mirror the factory's minute-by-minute consumption curve, while simultaneously navigating those state-specific wheeling and banking charges to minimize regulatory leakage.
I was thinking earlier about buying an off-the-rack suit from a massive department store versus going to a bespoke tailor.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
The department store has total dominance in supply chain and fabric costs. But the bespoke tailor survives and charges a premium because they understand exactly how the suit needs to move with your specific body. In this market, the factory's load profile is the measurement.
That analogy holds up really well under scrutiny. The measurements are incredibly complex. A textile mill in Tamil Nadu has a vastly different energy consumption signature and regulatory environment than a data center in Maharashtra.
Right.
The C&I specialists thrive by acting as that bespoke tailor. Regional expertise, nimble regulatory maneuvering, and deep customer integration often outmaneuver the brute force scale of the utility giants.
Which explains why the market architecture remains a mix of a few national platforms alongside entrenched regional players, rather than an oligopoly controlled by 3 mega utilities.
Right, exactly.
And this leads us perfectly into the case study of CLEANMAX. How has this specific company architected its business to not just survive, but dominate as a top-tier challenger in an arena filled with utility giants and demanding industrial buyers?
CLEANMAX's position is fascinating because their primary defense mechanism is not a proprietary technological patent. They aren't manufacturing a secret, higher efficiency solar cell.
So what's their secret?
Their moat is constructed from distribution density, execution track record, and a contracted ecosystem that engineers brutal switching costs for the client.
Let's unpack their scale metrics based on the research. They are operating across more than 10 states. They have secured 555 distinct corporate customers, and they captured an estimated 8% share of the FY25 open access capacity additions.
But the metric that truly validates their model is the repeat business. The sources highlight a 77.28% repeat customer demand.
In heavy infrastructure, a repeat rate approaching 80% is astounding. It means the initial bespoke solution actually performed as modeled in the real world.
C&I origination is an intensely relationship-driven enterprise sales process. A developer has to convince a skeptical CFO to alter their core operational infrastructure. By demonstrating execution reliability and then securing repeat business from blue-chip counterparties, CLEANMAX creates a compounding reputational advantage that a utility-scale developer cannot instantly replicate, regardless of their cost of capital.
Okay, I want to drill down into the switching costs, because the sources detail a contract structure that borders on the inescapable. When an industrial giant signs a PPA with CLEANMAX, what are the actual parameters of that commitment?
The duration is the anchor. The average PPA tenure for CLEANMAX sits between 22.7 and 22.9 years.
Wow. You are locking in your primary operational input for a quarter of a century.
And embedded within that duration is an average lock-in period of roughly 16.8 to 16.9 years. During this lock-in phase, breaking the contract incurs severe, often prohibitive financial penalties.
So this is not a SaaS subscription. If a competitor knocks on the factory door in year 6 and offers electricity for 50 pays cheaper, the factory cannot just migrate.
The barrier to exit is astronomical. But it's not just the legal penalty. CLEANMAX's model embeds them deeply into the physical and regulatory operations of the client.
How deep are we talking?
They manage the bespoke hybrid integration, they secure and maintain the state approvals, they optimize the daily interconnection parameters. For a rival to poach that client, they would have to buy out the 16-year penalty, physically replace or integrate with site-specific infrastructure, and assume all the localized regulatory risk. The ecosystem lock-in is incredibly robust.
Which brings us to the most provocative data point in the entire research stack, the pricing. The sources show CLEANMAX's realized tariffs are hovering around rupees 3.66 to rupees 3.76 per kilowatt hour.
That is the reported range, yes.
But the utility scale benchmarks, the price are down at rupees 2.44 to rupees 2.46 per kilowatt hour. That is a chasm. We're talking about a premium of over a rupee per kilowatt hour. In an industrial landscape where margins are measured in fractions of a percent, how does CLEANMAX convince sophisticated procurement teams to pay a 50% premium?
It forces you to redefine what the client is actually buying.
Yeah.
They are not buying a commoditized electron at the point of generation. They are buying an engineered solution delivered to their factory floor.
The premium is the cost of removing friction.
Precisely. If an industrial buyer wanted the rupee 2.44 price, they would have to acquire their own land, manage their own EPC contractors, navigate the state transmission utility, design their own hybrid balancing algorithms, and absorb all the execution risk.
That's a lot of overhead.
Yeah. By paying rupees 3.66 to CLEANMAX, the buyer transfers all of that complexity, regulatory exposure, and upfront capital expenditure off their balance sheet. The premium reflects the value of the bespoke integration, the reliability of the dispatchable power, and the assumption of risk by the developer.
It is the difference between buying the raw materials to build a car versus buying a fully serviced, insured vehicle that guarantees you get to work every day.
And for a facility where an hour of downtime costs crores, the guarantee of firm, tailored power easily justifies the tariff premium. However, the sources offer a stark warning about the longevity of this specific advantage. The C&I sector is dynamic, and CLEANMAX's premium tariff is not structurally immune to market evolution.
Even with the nearly 17-year lock-ins protecting their current portfolio.
The legacy contracts are insulated, but the forward-looking business model faces a threat from standardization. Right now, engineering a hybrid RPC solution is complex, giving specialists an edge. But as battery storage becomes ubiquitous, as energy management software becomes commoditized, and as regulatory frameworks for green energy become more standardized across states, the complexity of delivering firm power will decrease.
And as the complexity decreases, the utility giants with their lower cost of capital will find it much easier to deploy standardized RTC products at scale, squeezing the premium that the specialists currently enjoy.
The bespoke suit becomes easier to mass produce. The sources imply that while CLEANMAX's distribution density and origination network are durable moats, their integration edge could erode over time. To maintain that tariff premium in future contracts, they will have to continuously innovate on the service and storage integration side, staying one step ahead of commoditization.
This exploration has fundamentally shifted how I view the industrial landscape. We began by dismantling the illusion of total market demand, realizing that the real action is hidden in the heavily filtered layers of eligible, creditworthy commercial load.
We charted the structural push and pull factors, how the relentless mathematics of cross-subsidies are driving industries away from the state utilities, while the evolution of open access regulations pulls them toward private developers.
We explored the absolute necessity of 247 firm power, dissecting why intermittent solar is no longer sufficient, and why falling battery costs are the critical variable waiting to unlock over 100 gigawatts of tendered storage capacity.
And we analyzed the competitive arena, determining how C&I specialists leverage execution reliability, regulatory fluency, and complex hybrid engineering to secure 2-decade ecosystem lock-ins, allowing them to command premium tariffs in the face of utility-scale capital.
So to you, the listener, the next time you see a massive manufacturing facility or purchase a heavily engineered product made in India, recognize that behind the scenes, the energy powering that production is likely part of a quiet, multi-billion-dollar migration. A parallel, highly engineered green energy grid is being constructed contract by contract.
It is a profound reallocation of capital and infrastructure that is reshaping the operational foundation of the economy.
Which leaves us with a provocative dynamic to consider. We detailed how developers rely on 22-year contracts with nearly 17-year lock-ins to secure their returns. It's a brilliant financial defense today. But we are operating in a sector where lithium-ion cell chemistry, solid-state battery technology, and next-generation solar efficiencies are evolving at a blistering
Well,
pace.
the technology curve is moving faster than the contract durations.
Exactly. So what happens in year 10 of that 23-year contract when a breakthrough in solid-state storage makes the technology installed today look fundamentally obsolete? Will these ironclad lock-ins become a suffocating anchor, forcing industries to pay a premium for drastically outdated, inefficient infrastructure? Or will the competitive pressure of the market force developers to rip out and replace that obsolete hardware on their own dime just to prevent their clients from revolting? The tension between financial lock-in and technological obsolescence is going to define the next decade of this green transition. Until next time, keep diving deep.